Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Mind What Matters, where we mind all things that matter, but especially caregiving. We are really excited. Actually, I don't think I've ever seen Liz this excited for a guest, which is the sweetest, most tender thing ever. Today, we are talking about a different kind of caregiving, and it is the caregiving that we give to our children. And I know, Liz, you have a lot of experience with that. A lot of my caregiving experience is with dealing with my son and 3 heart surgeries and living at a hospital and keeping him alive for years, and every single thing that you pour into that is all consuming. It is not just for a certain period of time. It is for the rest of your life. And, also I'm excited to really talk about, what that looks like whenever so much love and care is poured into you, because we're going to be talking about to an adult where that much love and care was poured into him by his mom and especially his dad, and what that does for you, what that gives you as a kid and then a teen and then an adult, and how it helps you move through the world. Liz, do you want to say a little bit of something? Look at you. You are
No,
so,
it's so funny.
you're
Do you
so,
remember when we interviewed Dr. Sharon Malone and I was like so nervous and I was like, I live in Nashville with all these celebrities and I could care less about any of them all the time. And you in LA, like, I don't care who you are, especially if you're a celebrity. But like, I was legitimately nervous to talk to her just because her brain was so smart and so brilliant that I
yeah,
was
she's
so
brilliant.
information
Yeah.
I want to get out of you.
Yeah.
That's how I feel today. This
Yeah.
guy, you guys, and I'm just gonna go on a small tirade here, and then Nikki's gonna read his bio, and we're just gonna hit jump on this. But he has done more remarkable things in his life, and I think anytime I have ever come across somebody who has endured hardship and has really had to overcome struggles, I immediately identify with them, right? Like I
Mm-hmm.
know I had my share as a kid and growing up, but you guys, I've never seen anyone with more tenacity, more purpose, a stronger just internal drive. And it's all over his book that his dad instilled this in him. But I'm sorry, you just don't have that unless it is God given. Like it is part of this guy. And not only is he brilliant, but he is just overcome so much, particularly from his childhood to get where he is. And without going into a lot of my personal stuff, because I'm just not going to do that today, we identified with him as a family. Um, I am in awe of the amount that he's done with his life in terms of just everything from being a kid to growing up and how he got to college and how he made it through and then how he found himself as a journalist putting his life on the line just to tell the truth. I'm so
Mm-hmm.
excited. Okay, Nikki, read his bio. We
Yes.
have to get him talking quickly.
Yeah, so yes, because we want to speak less today and let him take up all the
That's
space,
right. That's
because
right.
that's right. Our guest today is someone whose public face you may know very well and whose story you were beginning to learn a lot more about. Leland Vittert is the host of On Balance with Leland Vittert. He is a chief Washington anchor for News Nation. There's his book, yes. He's a veteran journalist with a BA from Northwestern School of Journalism. He spent years as a foreign correspondent at Fox News, covering everything from the Middle East to the White House North Lawn, before becoming one of cable news's most recognizable faces. But behind the polished, brilliant, composed anchor is a story that he kept hidden from virtually everyone in his life. From a young age, Leland showed signs of autism. And his new book, Born Lucky, A Dedicated Father, A Grateful Son, and My Journey with Autism, is the story that he's never told until now. And the thing that I loved so much about it that made me want to just cry, it is truly a love letter to the man who refused to let a diagnosis write his son's ending. Wow. Welcome, Leland. We're so happy to have you.
Thank you. Thank you. And, as you ended that saying it was a love letter to my dad, that's really what Born Lucky is. It is hope for every parent of a kid having a hard time. It doesn't matter if it's ADHD or anxiety or bullying or just the problems growing up. physical disabilities. I had one mother whose child had a peanut allergy who emailed me and said, we don't feel alone now, and we know there is hope because of
Yeah.
your story, because of the Born Lucky story. And that's been, the most gratifying part is hearing all of those stories. It has made telling this story really worth it. In addition to, I really wanted my dad to understand, and he's getting older now, so you don't know how many years you have left,
Mhm.
that he understood that or he knew that I understood, maybe the better way to say it, of what he went through and the love and the dedication that he showed to me. And I still probably don't understand the half of it, but I wanted to try to make an effort to show him that I could think about it.
Mm.
Oh, Leland, that's so beautiful. Actually, yesterday was a hard day in our family. I have 2 neurodivergent children, so on top of all the hard stuff, we've been through a lot of things there. And I said to 2 of the parents as I finally got myself to the soccer field and all the things, and I said, "Do you think they'll ever know what we've done for them? Like, do you think they'll ever know?" And you just answered the question. Maybe not all the children will know, but I think because of your specific journey and all that you've gone through and your relationship with your dad and what a special human being you are, you do know. And so for every parent that reads this book and hears this story, it is also for us that we're waking up every day and pouring our heart and soul into our children and trying to stay 10 steps ahead. I think the one thing, well, there's a million things to take away from your book, but one of the things is for me to go, wow, like they do know. They actually do know. And I want to start.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I certainly
What were
didn't
you
at the
going to say?
beginning. I certainly didn't at the beginning. And, my parents never told me that I was diagnosed with autism. So, and we'll get into that in the
Really?
story. No, they never did until I was in my 20s and 30s. We would joke about it and talk about it, but I never told anyone. No bosses, no girlfriends, no therapists, no counselors, no teachers, no principals. My parents never told any of their friends. I didn't have any friends to tell. And that meant my parents went through it, silently and suffering. And
Mhm.
as we decided to write the book, I was in my early 40s, and I sat down and almost as a journalist started interviewing my dad and my mom and my sister, because you had to see it from their perspective. And obviously there were a lot of stories from when I was much younger that I didn't know or couldn't really tell or had to remember. And my mom told me this, that after nights at home when my dad would, in their words, try to put me back together again, I kind of would come home every night like a puzzle, beaten
Mhm.
and broken emotionally. And we'd be up in
Mhm.
my room, and I would spend a couple of hours, you know, yelling at my dad or crying or whatever it was to sort of offload the emotional burden that I was dealing with and the cruelty. He would leave, and I'd either do homework or cry myself to sleep. And so, he'd leave me in my little room, and he'd walk downstairs, and my mom would often find him in our living room, pitch black at night, 1, 2 o'clock in the morning, sitting on the couch. I can still see it. There were 2 blue couches in an L, and he would sit there and he would just cry himself
Mhm.
for hours. And my mom would come out and find him by himself. And he said, as I interviewed him later, just how alone he felt and how hopeless he felt. And
Yeah.
so the Born Lucky story is A, proof that nobody's alone, and B, that there really is hope, that parents
Mm.
can do so much, and that George Will, who obviously knows a lot about what What Matters is about, and that unconditional love of his son, for example, who has Down syndrome. George
Mhm.
wrote that uh, Born Lucky is the proof of the mountain moving power of parental love,
Mhm.
Mm.
and and that really, I think, is a takeaway that is so meaningful.
Yes. I want to thank you for sharing that. I want to start with, you've been on national television for years, right? And as you said, no one knew the full story. And I carried a secret too, of sexual abuse as a child, teenager, and I carried that secret my whole entire life until I was finally opened up about it last year. And so I know what it's like to carry a secret. So I wanted to ask you, was it like for you carrying that secret through your career? And what finally made you decide to tell it?
No, it's a great question. I was always open that I had a really hard time growing up, right?
Same,
Now,
right.
and I never sort of shied away from that. That said, I didn't wear it on my sleeve, but I never told anybody about the diagnosis. Going to therapy on national television, as I have done since the book came out, is a little bit like sitting in a bathtub full of scissors. It won't kill you, but it's not a lot of fun. It's not a lot of fun to relive. And I think, Nikki,
Okay, and Nikki, this guy says all over the book he can't land a joke. Leland, you just did it beautifully.
lots of practice. Um,
That is the perfect analogy, Leland.
So
it's like sitting in a bathtub full of scissors. It won't kill you, but it certainly is not comfortable.
No.
Continue.
And look, you know this because you did it as well. But the fact that we've had about 1,000 letters now so far, and that's not counting social media DMs, but emails, real letters of people talking about how they don't feel alone anymore and their kids don't feel alone anymore and how they have hope as parents. That has made it worth it. I don't think it really makes it any easier. I don't know about you, Nikki, but when I first started telling these stories, my co-author and I were working together, and I would have a couple glasses of wine every night as we were working on the book, and I just, would kind of write, and occasionally when he and I were talking and writing, I'd have a little bit of a hard time, but not much.
Yeah.
The hardest thing for me was reading the audiobook because I was really processing and re-experiencing some of these emotions. And then ... is I've told it now, 180, 190, 200 times, some of these stories, you kind of become numb to it, which probably in the end is what therapy would have done when I was, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, those guys. I just never went to therapy. So I guess this is now my version of therapy.
I actually will say, I did put myself in therapy because I had to go into recovery for, when you experience abuse like that as a child, there's always something else that comes out. For me, it was a disordered eating because it was the only thing I could control.
Yep.
And so I finally went into recovery in my early 20s for that. So I was very therapized. But believe it or not, I never spoke about the sexual abuse. And it was only until 2023 when I finally went into therapy for it. But yet still it was a secret. And I think that there is something about actually speaking your truth out loud for other people, like not just in the room with a therapist. And if that's what you decide and that's how you heal, and you never want to tell anyone the things that have happened to you or the things that you went through, and that's your journey, that is also okay and great and amazing. There was something that I felt was deeply therapeutic about no longer keeping a secret from anyone in my life, and especially when you live very publicly like you do and like I do. It felt like I was almost hiding the largest part of myself that actually was the part of me that actually gave birth to the advocate and the activist that I am today. That was why, because I was a child that went through these very hard things and a teenager, and I carried it. And it also was the part of me that fought for my grandfather and that fought for my dad and fought for my son and continues to fight for our most vulnerable in our country and our veterans that is the part of me that gets me out of bed. And it was like not sharing my why. Felt like I was almost not living in my full authenticity. I don't know if that's what it feels like for you to now to feel like completely aligned in authenticity. No? What does it feel like?
Not much different. And look, I grew up with a stiff upper lip, and that was sort of what my dad taught me and what my mom taught me of, you never let them see you sweat. And you can see in Born Lucky, the days that I would go through school crushed and humiliated the day that still remembered in 8th grade when an art teacher who didn't think I was going to become Picasso at the end of class was looking at everybody's pictures, and
I
you could
hate
see
this.
the art on the wall and the pottery wheels and everything else. It's a small private school, so it's a big art studio. And this teacher looks at me and he goes, Vittert, in front of the whole class, he goes, if my dog was as ugly as you, I'd shave its ass and make it walk backwards in front of the whole class. Everybody laughs and roars. Okay, fine. So you come home that day completely humiliated, broken. I never let anybody see me be upset at school. You would never let anyone see that they got to you. Weakness is provocative. That was something else I learned from the Middle East. But, my dad was the one to be there and put me back together and then make me go to school the next day, which sort of is that story of resilience, I think, Liz, that you were talking about, and Nikki, you were talking about teaching kids that they can do hard things is a real gift. And yeah, there's a fine line, and we can talk about that or disagree about that. But I think that teaching people that they can do hard things and also holding their hand while they do it, it's so easy now in the world to take adversity away from kids, rather than
Yes.
push them through adversity. And that's what my dad did. He said, look, you're going to have to go through these things. I'll go through them with you, which was much harder for him too. But the Born Lucky story is the story of a father who said, I am going to hold my son's hand through adversity because it's the only chance he has. And this was my dad's decision to adapt me to the world rather than adapt the world to me.
That was my favorite line in the
Yeah.
whole book, Lucky, is just, and you
Yeah.
say it over and over again
Yeah.
throughout the book, but it's the world is not going to change for you.
No.
Mm-mm.
And look, that's controversial right now to say, right? And I think, Nikki, you said,
Very.
like, everybody's like, well, I have my truth, and therefore everyone else should, kind of
There's the truth.
redraw the roads because of your truth. No, that's just not the way the world works.
There's one
It's
truth.
not.
The truth.
Well, and also I will say, that's one thing that I really also connected with with your story is, I too was very much raised in, really tough people, man. I mean, again, that same environment, deep South, you don't let anybody see you sweat. I had so much grit in me as well. And we live at a time where we are trying to find, or at least we in our family, we are trying to find that balance that your dad found of like teaching our kids grit. And I had this conversation with my 8-year-old this morning who, because of all of this, 60% of kids that have heart issues also have neurological challenges as well. And the ways that Bennett shows up, it's extreme ADHD and some other things that go along with that. And I said to him today, as we were going into school, it was a hard night, it was a hard morning. And I had that conversation where I looked at him and he was like, I can't, I have ADHD and I have this and I have that. And I said, look at me. You can. You have gone through 3 heart surgeries. You are the toughest fighter that I know. You are a warrior. You have survived what most adults have not survived. You're going to let this take you out? Absolutely not. You've got this. Look at me. I believe in you. You have got this. And I am going to be here every step of the way to help you and to be next to you. But you got to drive this train, buddy. And I will be right in the passenger seat with you. And we had that conversation this morning. We have to have it all the time where Hudson will be tired from this and not want to go. And I'm like, no, you signed up for baseball. We are going. I don't care how tired you are. We are going. Not, oh, yes, I know, honey. No, I know you're tired. So it's teaching that balance of the grit. But I think what you said is exactly it. It's like, you're going to do the hard things. And I'm going to teach you what resiliency looks like. And also, I'm not going to leave your side. I'm going to hold your hand through every step of it. That's the way, right?
No,
or at least it's the way for us.
Right. And that was the decision my dad made. So when I was 8 years old, it was clear I had a lot of issues. And the woman who eventually diagnosed me said to my parents, this kid has big problems. So there were all sorts of signs of bullying and acting out and sensory issues and on and on. So they take me to
Yep.
go get tested, and every parent has, been in a waiting room waiting to hear about their kid. And there's the linoleum floors and stale coffee and old magazines. For the
The
listeners,
quiet.
magazines were these things that, have paper in them and pictures, and you sort of flip through them when you didn't have a phone to look at. And I think you said the quiet, right? That, you're
The
just sort of
quiet.
sitting there. And for my parents, it was 2 or 3 hours, obviously not as long as a heart surgery. And the woman comes back out and says, your kid's got big problems, right? Big behavioral problems. Forget birthdays or play dates or anything like that. If a kid looked at me wrong, I'd turn around and slug them. Didn't matter if it was in a classroom or a lunch line, whatever it was. There was sensory issues. So if I had a coat on or a socks or something like that I didn't like, I would melt down, the day would be over. And then there were big learning disabilities. So the IQ test back then was 2 halves of one test. My test showed basically I was somewhere between genius in some levels and retarded in others. 20-point spread is a learning disability. I had a 70-point spread. The woman said, this is the biggest spread we've ever seen. And my parents go, okay. And she goes, it's very difficult to understand what's going on inside his mind. My wife would tell you that is still true. And I was standing there because I was sort of like this little mini adult. My dad goes, okay, so what do we do? What can we do to help? And the woman goes, well, there's not much you can do. You sort of have to meet him where he's at. And my dad made the decision, and I think it's very similar to what you decided, Nikki, of, I'm going to adapt this kid to the world. And as he would say, he said he was scared to death and he had no idea where it was going to end up, but he knew where it was going to end up if he didn't try. And he decided to do it alone. And part of that, of not telling me, right, was he never wanted me to be able to say, I can't because. He never wanted anybody else to define me, but he never wanted me to define myself, and he never wanted me to have an excuse. And I think that's a very different approach. I don't pass judgment or offer advice. Born Lucky is a love story, as you all pointed out, but it is a different viewpoint than what we often see today.
True.
It clearly worked. That's all I'll say.
Well, and
you might find
also,
issue with it, but and I can already hear the parents in the back of my head that are like, but that's not fair. Now we know all this stuff about it, and we should make, accommodations, and we should give them longer on tests, and we should do this or that or whatever. And look, I have 3 kids with ADHD. And I can honestly say I have waited on some kids to give them even any accommodations. I have completely avoided the whole thing on others and have just said, you're on your own. I think you can do this and it's going to be okay. And different kids, different things, right? But I don't think anyone can pass judgment when you're in that situation. And guys, if you're listening to this and you have a kid that is 2 or 3 and you're at a play date and they look different or they're off to the side and they're not blending in, this is why I thought your story was so engaging and so important, is because oftentimes those parents are the ones that feel so alone. None of their friends are pulling them aside being like, hey, have you thought they might be on the spectrum, or have you thought it could just be sensory issues? Everyone just kind of pulls away, and maybe you stop getting play dates, or maybe people start asking you weird questions, and it's really tough. And I think for your dad, especially in that time, I mean, Leland, when we were growing up, barely anybody was even talking about ADHD. None of these things were widely discussed or widely really even publicized. This wasn't,
Right.
I mean, it was just, if you had ADHD, you were just the kid in the back of the room that was always in trouble, and the teacher was grabbing them by their collar and yanking them out to the hall,
Right.
that's all it was. And so I think your dad was doing the best that he can in a really hard situation that, frankly speaking, most parents are in at one point or another with, especially if you have multiple kids. You're gonna have a kid that doesn't fit the mold or isn't just like everybody else. And I think it's a phenomenal example of showing your kid strength and resilience. My only question for you is there any part of you, despite the story that you have told, is there any part of you that's like, man, Dad, would have been nice to I mean, I know you did homeschool your senior year, right? You were like, I'm out.
I did real homeschooling half of 5th grade and all of 6th grade.
Okay.
Fifth grade was when my dad pulled me out of school. Um, a kid, there was a fight, and the school didn't like me. I was problematic for them, and it was pretty remarkable because the fall before this all happened, my father had come over to school to check on me, and found out that I was in PE with the girls, that the coach had put me there to protect me. So he walks up to the PE fields and knows his son's having a hard time. He knew this coach. My dad was a great athlete and knew this coach from a different school, and says, how's Lucky doing? And they're looking out over the PE fields, fifth grade PE time. And the coach says, I think he's doing better this month. My dad goes, oh, really? Let's go see him. And the coach goes, I don't think that's a good idea. Why not? Well, I had to put him with the girls to protect him. So 3 or 4 months after that, I was in PE back with the boys. There was a fight. The school really didn't like me, didn't want me there anymore. And they were going to kick me out of school for starting this fight. And they told my dad, he started this fight and we can't have kids who fight. And obviously your son has big behavioral problems and it's time for him to go, blah, 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 blah. And my dad asked me what happened. I told him that I didn't start the fight, that the kid shoved me, and I finished the fight, which I was known to do. And my dad had taught me to do. So my dad goes over to the PE teacher that he knew, came up behind the side door so no one saw him go in. And the PE teacher said, your son's telling the truth, but they're trying to railroad him. And that's when my dad decided to pull me out of school. So pulled me out for the end of fifth, all of sixth grade. He thought it was going to get better in seventh grade when I started a prep school. Second week of school, the principal calls my mom and dad over. They're hoping everything's, kind of going well. And this is a check-in. And the woman starts off in the principal's office saying, everybody at this school thinks your son is quite weird. And that includes me. Frankly, I do too. So that's where we were. But to answer your question, it was half of fifth and end of sixth grade. And then my senior year of high school, I said at the end of junior year that I was done. And I actually didn't homeschool. I did a couple of classes at the high school that morning, and then I went to college in the afternoon, which was great. And it was a great transition experience. I think, because especially somebody like me who was having a hard time really needed kind of a gap to understand what going to college was like. And so that was a really good transition across, if that makes any sense.
No, it
Yes.
totally does. And you had just found your way in and had kind of like made a group of friends, and you were trying to like help this girl. I mean, you should tell that story too. It's just phenomenal.
Yeah. Yeah, there was my end of my junior year, I was blackballed from school. It was a small prep school. So there was a kid who was very popular who just said, one day I walked into the commons area in the morning for school before the big all school assembly, and nobody would talk to me. Everybody just turned around, turned their backs on me. And what had happened is that in the weeks before, a kid I knew had committed suicide, and the school had a big talk about, if someone says they're going to hurt themselves, you need to tell them. Need to tell somebody in authority. There was a girl who I knew, and I had sort of tried to make friends with some of the cooler kids. And to be fair, I'd sort of changed who I was, and I could learn to adapt. And this girl told me that she was going to kill herself, and then didn't pick up the phone. Nobody really remembers AOL Instant Messenger, but she told me over Instant Messenger. It was back in the day. So I called her phone. She didn't pick up. I called her dad's phone, her dad's pager, because he was a doctor. Nobody answered. So finally I went over to the headmaster's house with a printout of the instant messages and said, look, this is what she said. And rather than protect me, the school sort of said, these things happen, and told the family, obviously, who alerted them. And her boyfriend was one of the more popular kids in school, and said to the whole school, like, nobody talks to Lucky ever again. And they didn't. So at the end of that was the end of junior year. And I said to the headmaster, this will be the end of my time here, and I'm going to move on. And I did.
Do you wish that you had gone earlier? Like, do you wish you had just not had like, that's what I'm really trying to get at, I guess, in these questions is, do you wish your dad hadn't pushed you through? Do you wish you could have
It's a great question. You don't know what you don't know. So people have asked me, like, what's it like to date on the spectrum? I don't know. I don't want to know what it's like to date not on the spectrum. What's it like to be autistic in a newsroom? Is it your superpower? I don't know. I don't know what it's like not to. I know that learning to adapt, learning the discipline, the learned skills of human interaction are really important. Number one. Number two, and this goes back to hard things. I was sitting in my parents' living room with only a backpack. So my possessions had all been sort of condensed into a backpack. I was 36 years old. I had no job, no relationship, no place to live. And I had just spent a week in the hospital with COVID and almost died. And my dad looks at me and he says, "You're feeling pretty sorry for yourself, aren't you?" Yeah, as a matter of fact, I am. I'd been asked to leave Fox News or invited to leave Fox News, not to return. And he says, you know what? He says, you went back to school after the teacher compared you disfavorably to his dog's ass. You went back to school when no one would talk to you for 6 weeks and, push through. You can get back into the game. And you know how to do hard things. And that was really, 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 really reassuring. Like, it's one, and I think, it goes back to any process that tempers you. And, you think about SEAL training, for example, of how hard they make any of these selection processes in the military. It's because they want you to know that you can do it. They want to know you can do it. More importantly, they want you to know that as bad as it is, it doesn't suck as much as it did when you were in training. They intentionally make it that hard. And that's a really powerful, powerful gift to give any kid.
It's so true. I've had those conversations with Bennett. And that is how
Those are weighty
handle
conversations for an 8-year-old.
Yeah, but I've had to be forced into that via how much time. And by the way, he can't handle it with how much medical stuff he has had to go through. And we were going through a series of he had to go in. We were, he was long story very short. We ended up in hematology oncology, and he was having to go in for 2 months straight and get blood every single week and go through all these tests. And he was just having a meltdown about it. And it was really hard. And, I was trying to figure out how to handle it. And and what I said to him was very similar to what your dad said, which I was like, I need to remind you, you've had 3 heart surgeries. I got to remind you of all the hard things that you've done.
Yeah.
And I understand that this also feels very hard, but think about the really hard things that you have already done. And here's the thing I can promise you, that prick that you're going to get, that test you're going to get, I can't promise you it's not going to be uncomfortable, that it's not going to hurt a little bit. But what I can promise you is you've done harder things. And also, I'm going to be right there with you. And it was the thing that actually did turn him around. So it's such an important way to be able to phrase it, because it's the same thing. You're not alone. And also you can do hard things. And I had to have that conversation with him when he was 6. And, I want to actually ask you a question. I know you said you're not in the game of giving advice, right? That this is your story. However, there is something to touch upon that I see even at our, our beautiful private school motto, good and kind, right? Where the teachers,
mottos are normally what they are not. I always feel like if people have to tell you what they are, they're not. Like when the car salesman goes, I'm really just an honest guy. Like, okay,
okay,
yeah,
sure. So I see a lot of situations where it's not just the kids, it is the adults, it is the teachers, it is the administrators that are not very good or kind. And so I understand that teaching kids at a very young age, right? It is important, because what I have seen in my own life is, like, as an adult, it's ACA, right? Adult Children of Alcoholics and Dysfunctional Families. Great recovery program, by the way, if anybody needs it. We cannot change other people. So we have to figure that out within ourselves. Do we want to be in a relationship with that person? Because we can't change them. You can't change other people, right? You can speak the truth. You can ask for what you need. And at that point in time, if they decide not to do that, hey, then I have a decision to make about how I want to be in relationship. For children, is there a way, should we, as adults or as communities, we know we can't control other people, but is there something we could do in our schools and in our communities to teach adults? Because we're modeling behavior for children, and I would say not very well, a lot of us. We're telling children to be good and kind, but we're not modeling it ourselves. How do we navigate that in this world? And is there anything we can do about that to be more kind and open and considerate, especially to children who are neurodivergent or going through challenges? We don't know what's going on behind closed doors. We don't know if families are going through divorces. We don't know. Is there anything we can do?
There's a Carrie Underwood country song, because all situations can be explained by country music lyrics.
That is true.
God.
If you think about it for a minute, there's a Carrie Underwood song which goes, "The more boys I meet, the more I love my dog." Right? So, if we were all just a little bit more like my black Labrador named Dutch, life would be pretty good. This reminds me of a speech that Tom Brokaw gave to the University of Iowa. And he said that the best training in life was middle school. And, of all the things my dad told me to get me through into the next day of middle school, he did not say it would be the very best training for a Washington newsroom, which he was right. But, we all wish that there was a pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, right? Which we all would hope that all of these teachers would be good and kind and on and on and on. They're not, because they're human and they have human insecurities, and they are no different than the rest of the world. There's good people and there's bad. In the book, in Born Lucky, we don't use the name of any of the people who are mean to me. That's not because I don't remember them. I do. And my sister does too. But that's the one you have to watch out for. But I intentionally didn't use the names because I wanted to show, by using the names of the people who are kind, how much more that meant, right? And that to me is really the answer. It's the people who are kind who you really end up remembering and you really end up being grateful for. I think the flip side of the you can't change somebody is you don't have to remember them either, right? And you don't have to remember and be defined by the cruelty and the indignities and the difficulties that they bestowed upon you. If you forget them, you set yourself free, which probably has been helpful for me to do. Again, my sister is not nearly that forgetful as I am, but
I bet Liberty is the one to really like.
Liberty will cut you, and you will never see it coming. And look, she started young. Liberty perfected. She's 6 years younger than me, and it was my little sister. Brilliant MIT PhD in math. She perfected when we were little. She would pinch me, and right as she pinched me, she would yell, "Mom!" So Mom would turn around just in time to see me hit Liberty, and then I would get in trouble. And this is not, and she will now freely admit that she did that. This was not like a, sort of like, oh, I did this once. This was a thing that she did. So yes, mom is the person to be afraid of. Liberty is a person to be afraid of. But to your question, I don't offer the advice. I don't offer advice. What I can say is, you're not going to change the administrators or the teachers or the kids, but it's actually really useful to learn how to deal with that, and that those kinds of people exist, and that you got to fight through it. And I go back to the earlier you learn that life's a tough place, and it is a gift to give. And I think about, how much of a newsroom, especially when I was younger, was like middle school. It was great training.
Yeah.
I think there's one part of the book I want to read real quick, and the reason I want to read it is because I remembered you talking toward this is the latter part of your book when you're talking about after you left Fox and sort of how you were treated. And you could have had your 10 minutes of fame or 15 minutes of fame really disparaging them and bringing up all the points that they made that were unfair, unjust, or not the right way to handle.
Untrue.
And you were just like, nope, I think I'm going to let their actions speak louder than any of my words, and the truth kind of always prevails. And I think it is such a valuable lesson. My God, how I wish more people in the world would handle things like that. But unfortunately, that's not the way the world works, and that's not the way most people are. And I think one of the reasons is because people do not have a true sense of self-esteem. So many people don't. And as you say in many places through the book, it's not given to you. It is truly
No.
something that you earn yourself. And so I just want to read this one part. Nikki, maybe you got here, maybe you didn't, but this to me is just everything. It says so much about you. Some people grow up with everything handed to them. Some people have their paths cleared and their obstacles removed. But those people never feel the deep satisfaction that comes from knowing unequivocally that you earned your place. The world wasn't modified to fit me. I was better for it. Forcing the uncomfortable yields enormous gains because once you've done something you thought was impossible, you know you can do it again. And then you go on to say, in adulthood, you realized currency was resilience, hard work, and the ability to push through adversity. Dad had been right all along. Self-esteem wasn't given, it was earned. And I think that's like the truest message of your book is all of this hardship that you went through, it ultimately defined who you were.
Yep.
And that's what hardship
Still
does.
does. Yep.
It's what
Still
it does
does.
for all of us. It's
Still
only
does.
in life's hardest moments that's what shapes us. That's what forms us. It's
Yeah.
like where the rubber meets the road. But what would you say to that?
Well, I wrote it, so I probably should agree with it, right? Uh, I'm one of the few. It's always funny when you interview people who have books, especially famous people or whatever, uh, other TV personalities. You can always tell A, whether they wrote it, and B, whether they read it, because there's oftentimes I have interviewed people who have books and it is clear that I am referencing something in the book they didn't know was there.
Oh my God. Okay, that's horrible. I'm writing a book right now and I can't fathom that. Like I really
It happens all the time.
Yeah.
Now, there have been times that people have read me back something in the book that I forgot was in there, but
Okay.
that I knew the story, obviously, because I wrote it and on and on. But I was like, oh, I didn't remember that I actually put that in, or, we debated whether or not that story would stay or go. Because obviously there's some very, very deeply personal things. But yes, there've been a number of people I've interviewed and they're like, how'd you know that? Well, because I read the book. Obviously you didn't, but so yes, I agree with that. The larger part, I think, of the Born Lucky message is for parents out there that there is a lot of hope, right? That they can make such an enormous difference, Nikki, that you're making such an enormous difference in Bennett's life, right? That this is happening. And that he's going to learn that he can do hard things. And if you teach a kid that they don't have to do hard things, they won't. It's a very simple dynamic, right? That you don't learn that on your own. Some people can kind of create it on their own because they have to later in life, but you don't learn that on your own. I believe that the most important part of Born Lucky is the message of love, of what parental love is and what it means. And that there's so many parents who are struggling. That people are not alone in this. And I know you talk about, caregiving in a different way, but if you think about it, that's really what my dad was. He was my parent,
Absolutely.
my therapist, it wasn't, he was not taking me to doctor's appointments, or, helping me get out of bed every morning, but it was emotionally
It's all
this
the same.
extraordinarily deep time. So I'm
Yes.
still in awe of him, and how he handled that, and with the grace he handled that. The afterword to me is the most important part of the book, and that is the message from my dad that was 4 or 5 pages. And this part obviously isn't in the book, but we uh, we almost didn't turn the book in to HarperCollins. So as I'm writing it and interviewing Dad, at every time he's stopping and going, I don't know if we want to tell that story. That is really personal. Like, do we really want to talk about whatever? And I said, this isn't going to work. You're going to have to tell me every story. It's going to have to be as raw as it possibly can. And in the end, if you don't like it, we won't turn the book in, which was sort of a throwaway line, right? So it's Tuesday of deadline week, and I send the book to Dad, the manuscript, and he calls me on Thursday night after I get done with the show, and I'm sitting on the couch with my wife watching TV, and phone rings, it's him, and he goes, hey, I don't think we can do this. We can't turn this book in. And I said, okay. He goes, it's too personal. Well, Dad, we have 65,000 words due to HarperCollins tomorrow. I don't think ChatGPT is going to fill in the blanks. What do you suggest? And he goes, I don't know, but I can't do this. And you said that we wouldn't have to turn it in if you didn't want to. I was like, yeah, I said it. I didn't think you were going to take me up on it. Lesson number 1. But anyway, I said to him, what don't you like about it? He says, well, I don't like that I'm a hero in this, because I'm not a hero. I'm just a father who did what any father would do for their kid who was having a hard time, which we all know is not true.
It's not true.
It's not true because of the Herculean effort he went through. But I wanted him to, he says, I said, okay. I said, why don't you write that? And he goes, what do you mean? I said, why don't you write it afterward? And he goes, I can do that? I said, yeah, write it afterward. So he goes, okay. When's it due? I said, well, tomorrow at noon, because that's when the book's due. He goes, okay. Hangs up. And an hour later, he wrote and called me back with what the afterword that you all read. And his 4 principles, I think, are really the most important part of the book. And we've actually created bookmarks with his 4 principles. And if people want, they can go on bornlucky.com, and we'll send you as many bookmarks as you want to share with your friends or family or anything like that. And it has his 4 principles. And that, to me, is really the only advice. You're holding them up.
I have them underlined and highlighted.
Oh, good. Well, those are the most important things.
They are
in there.
They are.
Well, I love that so much, and I also I relate to it so much because I think a lot of the time, well, I did whatever any mother would do, but the truth of the matter is that is not true. I mean, I was a child once, and there was a lot of things my mother did not do, and so I feel like your dad is a hero, but I do understand him not feeling like a hero because he
The sentiment
was just doing, yeah, exactly. But I do want to say, and after I say this, I have one more question, Liz. You might have some more, but yes, you might have been born lucky, Leland, but I don't know if this is also your dad's experience, but I feel like going through what I've gone through with my children and the heart stuff and the neurodivergence and the PT and the OT and the speech and the breathing therapy and all the things that we have done and the assessments and more assessments and more assessments and all of it. I'm the lucky one. It changed my life. It changed my life, my perspective. It changed how I move through the world. It changes how I see every single human being. It changed me on a cellular level. And it has been my greatest teacher in so many ways. And so for any parent that is out there right now that is going through something that feels very challenging with your child, let it change you to your core, to your, let it change. And I think that is part of it. It's like, as you're parenting your child, but also your child is reparenting you in so many ways. And my last question for you is, this show is about what we choose to pay attention to. It is about what we allow to matter. After everything that you have been through, what do you actually let matter now in your life?
Happiness and really finding and enjoying the good times because they're so important. Um, and my dad, when I was 17 or 18 years old, maybe 19, it's like right around after I graduated or before I graduated high school when I was in college, he asked me what I wanted to do with my life. And he'd been a very successful entrepreneur and on and on. I said, really, all I want in life is to be happy because I've spent so much of my childhood being miserable.
Mm.
And that to me is what is so important, that you can really choose to find this deep happiness and deep joy in things, and as simple as sitting on the couch with your wife and enjoying a bottle of wine together and talking um has come to mean so much to me. And I think at a
Mhm.
young age I realized, younger than most perhaps, what matters in life.
Mhm.
um and I think what matters is the love of the people that you care about the most. And that is really profoundly meaningful. And I so that to me is what I kind of really try to focus on, is that being happy, um, and being grateful. It sounds corny, it is, but
No.
there,
No.
there's a power in that. And to, I think, Nikki, your point and what we talked about earlier, I've learned, maybe actually through writing the book, how important it has been to let go of a lot of these moments. Um,
Mhm.
yeah, I think it was Bobby Kennedy who said, I forgive my enemies, but I do not forget their names." Which
Yeah.
I think is important, right? In the world's a round place. But the harboring resentment is something that hurts you more than it hurts the
Yes.
person you're resenting.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
That's absolutely true, and I just wanna say, I understand why your dad didn't want to be perceived as the hero of the book, and I'm just gonna guess, because I can tell you from personal experience, he sees you as his hero.
Yeah, he has said that. It very kind. Um, I don't believe it to be true. But you're perceptive enough to pick up on that. But I think it also, that really says much more about him than it does about me, right? Of how he views the world. And when you read the book, and I say this, is that for a very long time I told every woman I dated I didn't want to have kids because I didn't think I could live up to the standard that he did. And I think there's an irony, right? That for parents who, like him, who had this very austere father and everything else, he didn't really want kids either. Um, and the born lucky is my nickname, comes from when I should have been born dead.
Right.
And it one of my favorite stories in the book is that my mom, for her last appointment with her OBGYN before I'm born, she's 35. It's, first pregnancy, quite late for somebody in the 1982, walks out of the appointment sort of ashen because she's been told that there was some issues with me and that I was upside down and on and on and on. And my dad's sitting in the car. Well, right now there is, in 2026, there is no man who is allowed to sit in their car while their wife goes to the OBGYN appointment, right? This was long before the days of "we're pregnant."
That's amazing, though. I mean, just the fact that you made it out alive is amazing. I mean,
Yeah.
with that
The
first
the
the beginning of the book, I was like, "He really is born lucky," you
yeah.
know? I don't know. I think I'm gonna know you for a long time. Unfortunately, as Nikki will attest to, if I find myself in like or in appreciation of a human being, I find a way to keep them in my orbit, and,
Um,
you're gonna be there for a
I'm
while.
honored to be in your all's orbit, and thank you for having me. And I think it's important to say this because I did a little bit of research about Mind What Matters and in the folks that you have listening.
Thank
Hmm.
you.
There's a real privilege of mine to be talking to people who are so selfless, right? And who are in this fight. And my dad described it as a fight when it feels like the world has turned against you.
Yeah.
And there are so many people who feel that way, whether it's because they're taking care of their kids who are having issues like I did, or they're taking care of their parents who have issues, um, or a husband or a wife, that it feels like the world has turned against you. And the Born Lucky story is a story of hope that, number one, it gets better. You could, and number two, the work you're doing, even though hour by hour and day by day, it doesn't seem like it's making a difference. It really does. And that you're not alone in this journey. There are so many people going through the very same thing. People don't talk about it. Nobody shares it, on their shirt. But there are so many other families going through these difficulties.
Yeah. Too many. Way too many. That's for
Yeah.
sure.
Thank you. Thank you
Thank
so
you
much for
so much.
saying that. That means a lot. Thank you. Liz was like, I might cry. And I was like, well, and I'm just sitting here as you're saying that, like tearing up, and I'm like, don't you do it, DeLoach. Don't you don't you do it.
I'll tell you, it's I needed to hear that today specifically for me.
Yeah, we really did.
I've
Thank you,
recently
Leland.
we've both have started trying to advocate a little bit for this cause, and it's like it's entailing more than I bargained for. Let's just put it that way. You have to start a whole nother nonprofit, and it's just a whole other level of well, it's Washington essentially, and I'm learning real fast and real quickly just how twisted and like messed up that entire realm is, but also just how much people don't want to see change. And I can't tell you how many people have told me, no, we're not going to help. You'll never get it done. You're fighting a worthless cause. No one's ever going to listen to this. And it does feel often right now, especially like very thankless and really hard. So I needed to
There's
hear
a lot
that.
of people counting on you both.
Yeah. I know, Leland, I keep telling her that every single day because I quite enjoy when people tell me I can't do something, because then it's like a rocket fuel in my body, and I go, oh, really? Watch me. And so, but it really is nice to have that reflected back to us, especially from someone like you. We cannot thank you enough for the time that you gave us today. Your book, Born Lucky. Everybody, please go get Leland's book, Born Lucky. I am telling you, even if you're not going through his specific experience, if you are a parent whatsoever, you need to read this book. Everybody should read this book. There is a message for everyone inside of it. And also you can catch Leland, the host of On Balance with Leland Vittert. Thank you so much. Your story is amazing. You're amazing. And we really appreciate your time today.
Thank you all. Thank you both very much.
Thank you, Leland. Thank you for being here.